The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
Good morning and welcome to the Volpe Report. I'm Jane Adonizio, sitting in for our host, Chuck Volpe. Chuck was invited to the long-anticipated presidential announcement of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, which took place Wednesday. Chuck was invited by senior advisors to the governor, and he had the opportunity to observe the inner workings of a presidential campaign. This announcement, as we all know, was an unusual one, as the platform was Twitter Spaces, hosted by Twitter owner Elon Musk. But the live stream conversation was plagued with glitches, and due to the millions attempting to tune in on Twitter, the social media site crashed. However, when the site was restored, those on hand at the Four Seasons Resort in Miami, Chuck Volpe among them, heard the presidential hopeful as he outlined his vision and plans for his hope for the presidency. Governor DeSantis and former President Donald Trump appear to be the frontrunners for the Republican nomination, for which the nominating process is still months away. But as the field begins to grow, this week's announcement by Governor Ron DeSantis is the backdrop for this edition of the Volpe Report.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Good morning, Chuck, and welcome to your show.
Thank you, Jane.
How is Miami?
It's beautiful as always, although it is rainy season, and the Floridians have blamed me for bringing the bad weather from Pennsylvania, which we're more famous for.
So, Chuck, let's get down to business. How do you think you got that invitation to be among the invited guests as Ron DeSantis officially declared his candidacy?
Well, that's congrats on a kind of loaded question. It covers a lot of ground. So this is, as a lawyer, I know to say, this would be speculation, kind of, because I don't have a definitive answer. I can say that an educated guess would be, it's well known I contribute to campaigns. I get a little bit of press for some local stuff I do on local elections, but I, of course, contribute nationally and statewide, the statewide candidates and national candidates in a presidential situation. And I will say, the show is bipartisan. I don't endorse personally, although I have personal views and do engage in my First Amendment rights of free speech and all that. The show isn't for that. So what I can say is that I'm going to guess that being a pretty significant donor would be one of the reasons. And I will add for my audience so they're clear, they know Ron DeSantis is the governor of Florida and a Republican, famously, obviously. So, but I do contribute to Democrats, both in local and in larger races. I am a registered Republican, but the reality, and you know the history, Jane, I ran for governor of Pennsylvania myself as a Democrat. I was a conservative Democrat. I felt the party had gone too far to the left to accommodate my views, and I became a Republican. But I'm so I'm going to say that a combination of things would probably be that as a significant donor. The fact of the matter is this show is 10 years now, and you've been with us, thankfully. Your guidance and insight, you've been doing this longer than me, is always a godsend for me. But at 10 years of the show, we have had national guests, a multitude of them. We've had governors, we've had U.S. senators. So the show has built a reputation. I'm on YouTube, and then you can see me in Europe. If you have YouTube, you can see the Volpe Report and my views. So the DeSantis people were aware of me on the financial end of being a contributor. The show speaks for itself. And a lot of people that I commiserate with are friends with the governor. So I'm guessing that's exactly how I got the invitation. But I did get one, and I did go.
Well, Chuck, obviously you're so well known in political circles on both sides of the aisle. But I'm thinking, and you may have already answered this, what led to your going to Miami? Is it because you're so well known in Pennsylvania? Is it that important? Is Pennsylvania that important to a presidential candidate like DeSantis?
It's important to Governor DeSantis. It's important to former President Donald Trump. And I hate to say, and take too much credit for our state, but it really is the ball game. And here's what I mean by that. There's the big five in political circles, which is national circles and presidential circles. There are the big five. And California and New York and Texas and Florida and Pennsylvania are the big five. You're basically 20 electoral votes and up. 27 was Florida. We were 20 for actually 22 and then 20 and maybe even dipped, but around that threshold. But in terms of, the gross national product and our contribution to the economy of the country, Pennsylvania is considered a major state. We are the second largest energy producer next to Texas. California and New York would probably have claim to the title of second, if not for the fact that their democratic progressive regimes have shut down oil, fossil fuel, and even natural gas drilling. So, but if, by any regard, Pennsylvania becomes a major state. And here's the secondary reason, Jane. Pretty much the die is cast in the other four. Florida and Texas are pretty deeply red. Governor Ron DeSantis made Florida red. It used to be purple. Now it's red. Texas has always been red. And the other two major states, California and New York, are as deep blue as you get, navy blue. So it's fair to presume that California and New York will support, if he is in fact the nominee, President Biden and the Democrats, and that Florida, well, we already know his home state is a given. He just won by a record, never be seen plurality just a few months ago, Governor DeSantis in Florida. And Greg Abbott in Texas is a big friend, and they're close friends, I should say. So Texas and Florida are going Republican. So you have a standoff between the two. Then comes Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania becomes the gateway to the old industrial belt of this country. Right next door to Pennsylvania becomes Ohio, and then onward and upward, so to speak. So of recent memory, no president of the United States has won election to that office without winning Pennsylvania. Consequently, if you lose it, you lose. For example, recently, President Biden won Pennsylvania by about 70,000 votes in 2020 and became president. In 2016, then President Trump won Pennsylvania and became president, and so on and so forth back in time in history, well back. So I can speak about certain specifics. The DeSantis people understand that they have to win Pennsylvania. The good news for Pennsylvanians is that we're going to be bombarded in this election because the Democrats know how valuable, the Republicans know how valuable. It'll be valuable in the primary process for the Republicans. There won't be much primary expect for the Democrats. So no, it's huge. It's the Keystone State. We'll have a lot to say about the next president.
Well, Chuck, we know your depth and the breadth of your experience, and also that you ran for governor of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth. And of course, a presidential bid is so much bigger. But having run for governor in Pennsylvania, what do you see as the similarities, and how do you think that this is playing out for Ron DeSantis?
Well, great question. Yeah, there are similarities. For those that know, I ran a very serious campaign for governor. I got a sizable vote. I did not win, and that's a whole nother show on the intricacies of that race. But it was a serious campaign. In today's dollars, remember, I ran 30 years ago, it would have been probably a $12 to $15 million campaign in today's dollars in a primary. I had a full staff statewide. We ran commercials statewide in the Philadelphia market, Pittsburgh market. I started in February for a May primary, so I got known across the state. So at any rate, so there are similarities. You have to rely very, very much on professionals. In a sense that because of the mileage and air travel, in a state race, you probably travel more by car unless you have to. Like when I announced, for example, on a Labor Day weekend in 1993, I was in Pittsburgh, Philly, and Scranton-Wilkes-Barre were the major three markets. So we had a plane, of course, to get to all three places in one day. But over the course of a campaign, air travel is very expensive. So you end up driving by car, and it amounts to really close to the same time, because in 5 hours by plane from the East Coast, you can be in California and Los Angeles. So obviously it's all air travel in a presidential race, and the cost of commercials are a little bit more because you have to be national. But there are great similarities. So, it comes down to organization. It comes down to charisma. It comes down to the challenge candidates are presented with. And it's like a sporting event. You really don't know the outcome. Like, for example, a golfer may know what their abilities are, what they intend to shoot in managing a course, but then they hit a shot and it goes somewhere. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. If it's not so good, then you have a whole nother conundrum of issues that you have to address with. Campaign is you're on the fly, both the organization and the candidate. Now, I will point out this proviso. I ran 30 years ago. I was literally speaking on an old-fashioned, when they were this big, phone, and with home office using maps to get directions to events. Now, of course, on everybody's smartphone, they hit Google and they go right to the event. So it saves a lot of time that way. But there are many similarities.
And nobody would know that better than you. Yeah, times have changed a lot, and there's so many. We can talk about the Twitter announcement if you would like. What was the mood there when Governor DeSantis announced by Twitter and there were some glitches?
Well, this event was not like, as I know will occur, what President Trump is famous for packing in stadiums. This was probably a smaller event in terms of the type of people, in terms of politicians from around the country of some significance, whether a U.S. senator or a U.S. congressman, and financial donors of some significance that aren't the ones that just make the $2,000 contributions that they're using to raise money, which is very important in a presidential race. So probably the crowd in the ballroom was 150, 175. So it wasn't this massive a gathering. Interestingly enough, when you pulled up to the Four Seasons, I guess I wasn't prepared for. I was, of course, given a special medallion that you wore around your neck with the name and DeSantis for president. And that allowed you to get security access, because as soon as you pulled up to the Four Seasons in Miami, for a block long, there were protesters. A group was pro-Governor DeSantis. Another group was anti-Governor DeSantis. And then you had the various there was the abortion group that had their signs and things like that. There were Black Lives Matter signs. And I even had a group of signs that were pro-President Trump, campaigning, obviously, with signs against Governor DeSantis. They're the two front runners clearly in the race. So there was that, a bit large police presence because of that. And then the security was pretty significant. To get in, basically, there was security outside the hotel directing you what door to go in. There was security at the elevator banks directing you up. And then at the floor, there was security making you have the credentials to go in. So it was clearly intended to be a smaller, more intimate event. All the top campaign officials were there. And we were in a room, a smaller room, actually, because you're only talking about 150 to 170 people. So we were tuned in live to the announcement with Twitter, which, of course, now famously we know crashed. Well, they had millions. It overloaded Twitter so much, people tuning into the governor's announcement, that it literally crashed the system. So it started out as an interview with Elon Musk, who owns Twitter. And they are obviously friends and all that. Governor DeSantis complimenting on him on doing what he did with Twitter, talking about the censorship that occurs on social media platforms, favoring the left progressive Democratic ideology. And Elon Musk spoke at length about why he thought it was important to have a no-holds-barred Twitter to allow people to have access to, let's say, more conservative points of view. And then, of course, Governor DeSantis launched into his reasons for running. He got shortly into it, and then it crashed. So the crowd had to wait about, I'm going to say, maybe 45 minutes to an hour. And then we hooked back in, because then he went on Fox and all that and really expounded on the campaign.
Well, Chuck, it's fascinating to hear from somebody who's actually there. And we're just about at our first break, but when we come back, I'm sure your viewers would love to hear more about the atmosphere there at the Four Seasons Hotel in Miami, and we'll talk about the elephant in the room when we come back. Stay right here for the rest of the Volpe Report.
I have done too many editorials to count on the progressive Democrat, mostly white elite who have hijacked the Democratic Party. In an editorial by Michael Brendan Doherty in the National Review, he has given form to this amorphous constabulary. He describes this radically progressive cult as, quote, white upper middle class liberals who have undergone the Great Awakening, hijacking the Democratic Party. To be clear, these strivers are not the 1% of the upper class you hear so much about. They are instead the top 20% of income earners in America. They mostly resent the upper class and look their nose down with patronizing condescension on the non-degree working families in the lower middle class. To be clear, there are many in the upper middle class that are not woke and are good patriotic Americans who believe in American greatness and opportunity and subscribe to traditional liberal values. No, I refer to the woke, virtue-signaling, politically correct, who live in gated communities, spend summer vacations in places like the Hamptons, Martha's Vineyard, or the Outer Banks, fly first class, and lived in comfortable leisure. Their gift to the world is not their cleverness over the ignorant, but their, quote, righteous fury at the wicked and doomsday moodiness and punitive moralism. I will now conclude with Doherty's more extensive characterization, in which he describes at length this class that, begin quote, voraciously organized to protect their economic privileges. They demand a full restoration of state and local tax deductions, known as SALT. Their congressional representatives demand student loan forgiveness. They are significantly more likely than non-white Democrats to prioritize the use of, quote, inclusive language to avoid offending people with different backgrounds. They are the ones defunding the police, committed to a form of ruthless meritocracy in some areas of life and to ruthless egalitarianism in all others. Debt relief and minimum lot size regulations for households in their neighborhoods. Lawlessness in the name of advancing equality in your neighborhoods. The speech codes that this class invents and adopts in the name of easing the burdens on, quote, the marginalized, are wielded as weapons in an open form of class warfare on the lower middle class and working class kids who do not have the breeding to master that form of politesse. And if the American dream feels like a perishing fantasy in the present, even for those as blessed as the upper middle class whites, it is not surprising that they would increasingly adopt and propagate a revisionist history and view of their country, such as that offered by the 1619 Project, that damns America as a set of illusions covering over a substance of capitalistic oppression, end quote. The tentacles of this class extend into most American institutions. Their intent is to distance themselves from the working class, who they view mostly as deplorables, and have their economic privileges paid for by the upper class, who they resent.
Good morning. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Joe Albert, U.S. Army retired. I'm here today to invite you to join our annual Memorial Day program tomorrow morning, Monday, at Scranton's Cathedral Cemetery, Orem Street in Scranton. Memorial Day is a special day here in America. It's not a holiday to buy cars or shop for furniture, but a day of remembrance of those family and friends who served in the forces of the United States. To join us tomorrow, please, at 11 o'clock, and remember those who are gone but not forgotten. We thank Chuck Volpe and the staff and management here at Wolf TV for their support and encouragement for tomorrow. Thank you, and God bless America.
We are back on the Volpe Report. I am your substitute host for today's show, Jane Adonizio. We are talking with the host of the Volpe Report, Chuck Volpe, who's joining us from the Four Seasons Hotel in Miami, Florida. Chuck, what was it like there all last week as this much anticipated announcement from Governor Ron DeSantis finally played out?
Well, having gotten here several days ago, of course, I can speak from the time I'm here. And there's clearly anticipation in the air in Florida. You're talking about a governor who won by the largest plurality, arguably in Florida history. I mean, a 20-point win. Look, he won Florida by more than Josh Shapiro won Pennsylvania, which is saying a lot, because of course Governor Shapiro won Pennsylvania by a huge margin. But so there's clearly a big pro-DeSantis faction in Florida, and obviously he's announcing in his home state, which is fitting. So yeah, but there is this acrimony between the two top contenders, which are clearly Governor DeSantis. He's been that for the whole time. And the elephant in the room, you kind of mentioned before we broke, is former President Donald Trump, who still leads most polls for president ahead of Governor DeSantis. So, and the acrimony has come one way. Governor DeSantis has not attacked, or he's been very much a statesman relative to the former president. He says mostly good things about him. If he doesn't have anything to say, he doesn't say much about him. On the other hand, President Trump has been attacking him from the beginning when it looked like he would be an announced candidate. He's called him Ron DeSanctimonious instead of DeSantis, and other pejorative terms, which anybody who knows President Trump, he's kind of, I got to give him his credit, he's pretty inventive with name calling and does it in a kind of a funny way. So he kind of made his initial name for himself doing things like that. So far, the DeSantis camp has been not engaged in terms of fighting back, which I will say is a great strategy. And here's what I mean. For Governor DeSantis to win the nomination, he will have to defeat President Trump. However, to have any chance to win the presidency, he's going to need the Trump supporters, and they're going to have to be supportive of Governor DeSantis. So it's smart in his part not to personally attack President Trump and alienate those supporters that he will need someday.
That's true, because he was at one time close to Donald Trump, and now it looks like he's going to be Donald Trump's most formidable rival. But in the past, they were very close, and Trump actually helped him become the governor of Florida.
That is correct. He endorsed, he sent out actually on Twitter his way of endorsing, and Governor DeSantis has been clear that that was a big reason in that he won. Because remember, he won the first time back in 2018 by the smallest of margins. In fact, it was considered a major upset that he did win. But he did win. And I've said on this show, since I'm stealing a line, I like to always attribute who I heard it from. President John F. Kennedy, after the Bay of Pigs, when he faced the media horde, if you will, ready to pounce, he made a famous line about victory, he said, has 100 fathers. Defeat is an orphan. And I've always had stuck itself in my memory banks how eloquent a way to put it. So back to Governor DeSantis, when he won for governor in Florida, there were 100 fathers. There truly were. Trump can take some credit for helping, but it was his victory. It was his work and hard work and vision. So he deserves a lot of credit. But what he did, and the reason we're all in this conversation, and I'm down here today, is that the fact of the matter is what he did in 2022 signaled. And let me be specific about that, Jane. He not only won Florida by 20 points, he's been the first Republican in several generations to beat a Democratic in a statewide office in Dade County, Miami. Now, let me be clear about that. The rest of Florida, the Panhandle and all that, there are many conservative enclaves and Republican enclaves. But one place a Republican has to just write off, like in Pennsylvania, pretty much, okay? If you're running for governor, which I did, and you're running as a Republican, you're losing Pittsburgh and you're losing Philadelphia and you're losing them big. The issue is whether you can overcome in the rest of the state those big Democratic strongholds. It's unthinkable for a Republican governor to win Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. Well, Ron DeSantis effectively did that in Florida by winning Miami and Dade County, which is 3 or 4 to 1 Democrat. And he won it big. So that really, his ability to get crossover Democrats really was the fuel behind the impetus in the drafting of Ron DeSantis for president.
Well, now that he has announced he has to win the Republican primary and convince the rank and file that he's the ideal candidate, and the field is getting crowded, so it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out.
Well, there's no doubt, and obviously, you know, if you fall into two camps, and it would be a much longer show to get more specific, but if you view it as the two top contenders, which are Trump and DeSantis, that it's going to be one or the other. And it may not be, but let's assume at this point it is. You know, so the Trump path to victory, in my view, is how he won in 2016's primary. And that was, he never really got more than 35 to 38% of the vote, which means over 60% of the Republicans that voted in 2016's primaries voted for somebody else. What benefited President Trump was that he had always 4 or 5 contenders along with him. Right to the end, there was Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, right to the very end. And for a long time, the establishment favorite was Jeb Bush. And look, earlier on, there were 12 of them, and 12 became 9, became 7, and eventually those 4 or 5 hung on. And literally to the last primary before the nomination convention, Cruz and Rubio were still in. So you get an election result like, for example, you get, let's say, Trump with 37%, then you get Rubio with 28%, and then you get Cruz with 22%, and then you get Bush and 1 or 2 others adding up to the 10 or 12. We'll do the math. That's how Trump wins. So the strategy for Trump, again, he wants people in this party. He wants Nikki Haley, and he wants Senator Tim Scott, and he wants former Governor Chris Christie. The more the merrier for him. That's his path to victory. DeSantis, on the other hand, wants this to be an early knockout, so to speak, where how do you knock out other candidates? For people that don't understand the process, it comes down to money, Jane. If you run out of money and don't meet the threshold for federal matching funds and your campaign is on fumes, they shut it down, or the term of art is suspend their campaign, which means they're out because it's like a car that runs out of gas in the middle of the desert. You're just done. Car stops, there's nowhere to go. So DeSantis expects to be well-funded throughout and have to play the waiting game of outlasting everybody so that when the major states with the big super rich delegate state primaries occur, it comes down to almost a head-to-head race where he's confident he will beat President Trump.
Well, Chuck, it's fascinating to hear from you, and I hope you had a little time to enjoy yourself while you're in Miami.
That's always the case. Florida stone crabs are big here, so I have to eat my share. We can't get them back home.
All right. Well, thank you so much for all your insight and also for the trust that you're placing in me to sit in for you. Thank you so much, Chuck.
Well, I have to say, Jane, that if we put you on the air more, it might become the Chuck Jane show, because I know of your tremendous following, all your expertise through years, and much more than me. I'm still kind of learning this art, and you have mastered it. So I like to think I can still learn from you. You've done a great job today.
Thank you, Chuck.
And let me, before we end, Jane, say something I should have said at the earlier part of the show. This weekend this show airs is Memorial Day weekend. And let me say thank you to all of our veterans, past and present, living and sadly passed away, that are the reason we can do shows like this and provide the freedom for this great country to have the debates, even rancorous ones that we have. So I want to make sure I shout out to veterans and say thank you for your service.
And of course, the Volpe Report with your host, Chuck Volpe. We'll be back next week.
Every week, Chuck Volpe shares his perspective on Pennsylvania issues in the news and on your mind. From new laws being introduced in Harrisburg and Washington, to government spending and even local controversies, hear how they affect us in Northeast and Central Pennsylvania. Catch Volpe's views every Tuesday on the Fox 56 News, first at 10.